I think your microphone, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm from Norway, but I'm in Denmark now. So from University of Southern Denmark.
Yeah, many people in this group are, I'm from here, but I'm there, but currently I'm actually here. So, yeah. Yeah, Charles, please, I guess, next on my screen.
Hi, I'm at St. John's University in New York City, and today I'm at Father's Day in Newport, Rhode Island.
Yeah. Yeah, those who don't know, Charlie is not only moderating the International Management Division Academy of Management mailing list, but also at AAM every year he organizes this gigantic session with like 100 people or even more that talk about international business teaching, as I understand, right?
Yeah. The most has been 450, but
450. So when you're applying for a panel session and planning to have like 6 or 7 people and worry it's too many. So yeah. And William Johnson, I guess again on my screen, I'm not sure in which order the pictures appear on your computers.
Okay. Hi, it's Bill Johnson. I usually go by Bill rather than William, but I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania at Penn State University.
Okay, all right. And I'm not asking people to tell us about their research ideas, because throughout the discussion, it seems like everybody has interest in a form of OB/HR, organizational psychology, with an international sort of flavor to it. So most of us do research on some form of team or organizational behavior with interest in international aspect of those kinds of behaviors. So it's and everybody is fairly broad, some leadership, some teamwork, some performance, some motivation, some. So I guess no need in going too much into specifics. Mariana, I guess on my screen.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Mariana Gunke, and I'm at the Free University of Bolzano in Italy. But I'm a Finn who's lived most of her adult life in Germany. So
yeah, I wanted to say that your ethnic background or what is it, the citizenship background or, I don't know, location background, you need like half a page just to list all of the countries.
Right.
Yeah. Justin Kramer, I guess, next one.
Okay, so I'm a Canadian. I did 2 of my 3 degrees in the States. My first job was in the States, and now I'm actually in Thailand. So there you go.
Yeah. And sort of also in transition from one city in Thailand to another, kind of.
Right now I'm on the move. I'm actually visiting Bangkok, and part of my reason for being here was to figure out where I'm going to live when I move here in January.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Ernesto.
So I am Ernesto Tavoletti from the University of Macerata in Italy. And for those who don't know me, I have been taking my degree in Bologna, my PhD in Firenze, so my academic career has been all in Italy. And right now I have been working on Xculture on a number of papers. Recently I've been working with Bob on a paper that was about peer evaluation and performance that we have been submitting recently to the IB. And we have also been starting to work on the relation between proactive personality and performance. I've been working with Vas and Mariana on the ranking and the link between ranking and performance. I was thinking about doing something on the side of the relation between nationality and performance, if someone is going to be interested in these topics, or about ethnocentrism, even if I am really not yet certain about how we can address the topic of ethnocentrism. Maybe we need a qualitative approach, but on the other side, with nationality, I don't know, we can actually spend that from an academic point of view, but for certain it would be very interesting to see if there is any relation between the nationality of students and performance, and especially if there is any connection between other variables that are outside of the Xculture database. For example, per capita spending is actually, or GDP, that we might introduce.
Yeah. One thing, Ernesto, that I wanted to say, so that proactive personality, we might want to check a couple things before, because as you know, a few years ago, we had a couple of professors who started working on that paper. We even presented it at a conference. So it was Dilek Nair from Turkey who kind of spearheaded the idea, and we collected the data. Then Susan Gupta took over, and we had a paper presentation.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, I'll let you know. First of all, we do have a finished paper, at least it was presented at a conference. And second, just in terms of legacy, want to make sure that you don't have to reinvent the bicycle, but also people who started it at least know about it. And by the way, for everyone, one of the issues that sometimes we have to deal with is, when a person comes up with an idea and wants to develop it into a paper, what happens if at some point the person drops the idea? And we've had a few cases like this where, in fact, in the proactive personality case, we literally wrote the paper, we presented it at a conference, and then it's been dormant for like 2 years now. So would the group have the right then to take over and finish it? So it's never really had to decide, but sooner or later that issue may come up. So just something. Also, Ernesto, unlike most of us, he's actually more like economist, less sociologist, right?
No, I am actually business management.
But you do also work not only on teams, you also go a little bit more macro.
Yes. Business management, I teach international marketing, international business strategy, and general management.
Yeah. Okay, Miguel, I guess most of you know him, but if not, please. I think your microphone, it should be working now.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Blas. Miguel Olivas from Clarion University of Pennsylvania, currently in Dublin. And my first couple degrees were from Monterrey Tech in Mexico. Then my doctorate at the University of Pittsburgh, and that's what brought me back to Pennsylvania. I've done research on cultural change, cultural values, with an emphasis in Latin America, Mexico, and similar countries. And I do a lot of work also on information technologies and human resources management. So I'm looking forward to this experience, not knowing exactly what I'm going to work on yet. I'm still trying to wrap up a couple of encyclopedic entries that I was invited to submit. But this gig that brought me to Ireland has occupied a lot of my time this week. But I'm going to Copenhagen tomorrow, and look forward to meeting everyone this Friday.
Very nice. And talking about procedures, since you started talking about you're not sure what you will work on, so I suggest for today, the plan would be, once we're finished with the introductions, the plan would be kind of the ultimate goal is to more or less decide on what we would be working on starting next week. The topic can still change, the co-authorship teams can still change, some new topics may still be proposed, but we already have quite a few topics on the table. And so I thought we might want to go through the ideas that have already been proposed, see if anything else is proposed. And then, as I said, perhaps not fully finalized, but at least try to get a sense of who might be working on what, with the goal of, if I know what specific projects we are going to pursue and who's pursuing them, I'll try to have the data ready for each of you by the end of the weekend. And so this way you will have the data a few days in advance, and maybe even start doing some analyses also in advance. So let's see how much we can accomplish. In the past, we've done it several times. We always would start like literally at the time when we meet on the ground. We would have like a quick introduction webinar, but we didn't really know what papers we would be pursuing. And so obviously we would then spend a whole day at least, deciding on these things, which not a problem, and it still worked well, but we might save that day if we decided today, or at least had some indication as to what the topics will be and who's working on what. So once we're done with the introductions, maybe I'll do a very quick review of the topics that already have been proposed. Then we'll see if there are any new ideas on the table. We have some people who couldn't attend in the past. And then we'll see if, if anyone is ready to commit to any of those topics so we can start preparing the data. So let's finish up the introductions because we have a number of new people. So I have David Baker now, and then Eric next, and then just quickly so we know at least the locations and who the people are.
Okay, yeah, I'll be brief. My name's David Baker. I teach at University of Louisiana Lafayette in Lafayette, Louisiana in the United States. My background is 17 years in corporate international management, but also my master's degree is from Thunderbird Global School of Management. My DBA is from Grenoble in France. Mostly my research has been in the area of cross-cultural utilization of technology. Lot of several papers in the sales area and sales management, but also in the utilization of technology in terms of experiential learning.
Okay. Nice. And then, so I guess Eric would be next one.
Hello.
Yep.
Nice to meet you all. I'm Eric. Right now I'm in Denmark. I moved yesterday. So now I'm in Odense and I'm working on cultural intelligence, and I would like to work on the cultural intelligence rankings.
Yep.
Where we could investigate correlations between macro determinants or if there is.
Yeah, that's a very promising study. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, Bob Stevens. Microphone, just a second. Let me unmute that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm at Shippensburg University in Pennsylvania. I did my doctorate at Indiana University in Bloomington, MBA at University of Pittsburgh. I've also taught at the University of Texas at Brownsville and grew up in El Paso, Texas. So I've got kind of a Mexico focus early on. But lately I've been more European focused. And in terms of X culture, I've been working on a number of different projects with Ernesto and with Anna. With Ernesto explained the projects we've been doing, and with Anna we've been working on team diversity, particularly linguistic diversity, and openness to linguistic diversity, which is a variable we added in, had Bass added into the study last, I guess it was in the spring, no, in the fall. I guess it was in the fall we had data for that. So anyway, I'm open to a lot of different directions and looking forward to working with everybody.
Sorry, I may also need to introduce you. There is a PhD student at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte who recently approached me about doing a study on linguistic diversity and language distance in teams. And so she comes from kind of a mix of psychology / language. So like a very different perspective, but some cool ideas. So it seems like what you're doing and what she's planning to do is very different, but it may be complementary. So we might, connect you so that you at least know what the other one is doing so you don't overlap, but maybe borrow each other's ideas too. Anna, and then Zandra.
And I'm Anna, I'm Portuguese. So my whole academic career has been in the University of Minho, that's in Braga, north of Portugal. I teach international marketing and international strategy, and my research is mostly in marketing, consumer behavior, international strategy, and that's it.
Yeah, that's nice to have also people who are not exactly OB, so we can have also that angle. So especially for some theory development, that may be very useful. Zandra, I'm not sure if you're able, your video is on and off all the time. I see you're on the move. So I'm not sure if you can do the quick introduction. Let's see if it will work. Zandra, can you hear us?
Hello. Yeah, I was having trouble hearing you, so I'm trying to find an empty class here because I'm at university teaching right now. And so it's a kind of in-between jobs. So
where are you located? What country are you in?
I'm in Paris.
In Paris, in France. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So, yeah,
yes.
Pennsylvania still rocks. We have like 5 people from Pennsylvania, it seems. So quite a lot of diversity.
Okay. So, that's great. Anyways, I'm closer to our meeting place.
Right. Well, very nice to meet you all. So maybe just a quick overview for those of you who didn't have a chance to attend the previous webinars or didn't watch the videos. Just some of the topics that we discussed in the past. So if you see the screen here, I put together this Google Docs file where we listed all of the studies, or at least all the kind of bigger ones. And I'll just go through them one by one. And as you can see, people started also leaving comments, which is exactly what we want. there was a study or line of research suggested by William Johnson, and it would be dealing with creativity. And so the idea was that are more diverse teams more creative, or which teams are more creative? And so a bunch of related questions here, and so it seems like even somebody put a YouTube video with insights here. So, and I'm not sure, Bill, is anyone planning to join you, or so far it's only you who's interested in this topic?
Well, no one's actually contacted me, but I'm assuming that Sandra would be, given her comments from previous.
Yeah.
Am I correct, Sandra?
Yeah. And so again, we can change the topics. We can, ideally we want to have probably about 4 papers in development as we're going through the through the hackathon, so that when we have those kind of bi-hourly, quick presentations, feedback sessions, we have a manageable number of projects to present, get feedback. So maybe not even all of the papers that we have on the list we have to pursue. But at this time, it seems like we have, about 5, I believe, or 6. So it's a good number. If we keep that number, or drop 1 or add 1, we are still in a fairly good shape. Although probably 4, 5, 6 would be an optimal number. More will be probably too many. So as I said, one of the challenges with this study might be that creativity is very hard to quantify. So we do have some measures specifically for creativity, but even those, I believe, they're not perfect, and not because we're not doing a good job, but just because it's a notoriously difficult construct to grasp, even define, let alone to measure. So, but anyway, it's definitely a hot topic, and if we can get something out of there, that would be, very nice and very promising, and definitely publishable. This one was very interesting. Stefan is not here, but satisfaction and complaining, and I think there are 2 or 3 people who were interested in joining this project. Stefan started introducing this project by saying that he noticed that in his class in the United Kingdom, he has some students from the UK and some students who are international. And he noticed some systemic differences in who complains and who doesn't, who's happy and who's not with the project. And so he kind of suggested that maybe it is cultural. Maybe people from some cultures are much more comfortable complaining and being dissatisfied than people from other countries. And so the question then becomes, what predicts complaining? And it can be, culture, personality, maybe university rank, maybe people from top schools complain more because they have this sense of entitlement, maybe personal effort. If I work hard, I complain about others not working, age, gender, work experience, and so on and so forth. We have a bunch of possible predictors. And it could be approached from the point of view of team management, team members who complain, or it can be approached from the point of view of consumer management. So in a sense, students here are our customers or consumers, and so we can look at it more kind of from a essentially marketing or consumer management perspective. So again, and then possibly also the other side of the equation. So when a student complains a lot, or when the team has an average high level of complaints or dissatisfaction, do those teams perform less, worse, or better? So we can look and see if that matters. Maybe students who do an excellent job are not happy with everybody else not doing a good job. And so while they complain all the time and not satisfied, maybe they still do a very good job. So we can look at that, and there are some caveats here explained on the page. So to me, by the way, both creativity would be interesting. If we can improve creativity, our clients will be happier, so practically it's important. But complaining, the same thing. So we have to deal with that every semester. And while it's a small percentage of students who complain, but it would be nice to predict who will complain, to decide what to do about it. So even if it doesn't get published, or even until before it gets published, I really would like to know the answers to those questions so we can implement them right away in our project. Now, Charles Wankel talked about sustainability, and we looked at it from different perspectives, but we thought maybe look at, for example, either reports written by the teams or comments that they leave, and see how frequently they use words and language that can indicate sustainability kind of theme, or maybe environmental concerns and so on. And so we can literally run those qualitative data through a text recognition program and see if, for example, MBA versus undergraduate teams, older, younger, regional differences, quality of their report. So who talks more and who seems to be more concerned about sustainability. Again, quantitatively, it may be hard to quantify, but it seems like using the qualitative data, we can use that as a foundation.
I'm planning to use the Strategic Development Goals, the SDGs of the United Nations. And I've noticed there's a recent study by Global Compact of business executives on which of the SDGs they're addressing while doing their work and their company's work. And you know, it seems like we could compare, you know, what business executives are addressing with the sustainability ideas incorporated by students into the business plans, and see if there's an emerging divergence or congruity between them.
Exactly. So we talked about maybe using the time covariate here just to see if it's changing over time. And since we've been doing Xculture now for, what, 9 years, basically, maybe we can even look at whether or not those kinds of words or indicators of concerns for sustainability and environmental protection, if we see them more today than, for example, 7, 8, 9 years ago. So I'm not sure if it's a long enough time span to detect that change, but I suppose we can see, if it's really happening, we probably will be able to see some changes. Peak performance alignment, it's a study that has been around for a while, and it's extremely promising. So Mariana, Justin, and I thought about it for a long time, and hopefully now it's the time to talk about it. So the idea here is that one of the challenges seen or frequently talked about in relation to global virtual teams is that people are in different time zones, and presumably that makes collaboration difficult. But if you kind of look at people, you may understand that sometimes people may be more active in different times of the day. And so at least in theory, it may be possible that you have someone, let's say in Asia, who is most productive at night, someone in Europe who is most productive in the afternoon, and someone in the United States who is most productive in the morning. And so this way, even though they are all in different time zones, their peak performance sort of aligns, and they are most active at the same time, sort of in global time, perspective. And then we also did some data collection, not only on when you're most productive biologically, but also when do you have time for this project. Again, maybe some people, let's say a guy in Asia works and can only work on the project in the afternoon. Another one is at school and gets off the university, I don't know, at 2 p.m. and is able to work in the afternoon. Then maybe the American student doesn't have classes until the evening and can only dedicate time to this project in the morning. So in that case, again, the fact that they're in different time zones actually works very well for them. And vice versa, if somebody, on a team, everybody's active at the same time of the day, but they're in different time zones, maybe it's a problem. And then another thing that Justin brought up was that maybe it's a global relay sort of hypothesis. So maybe it's good that people are in different time zones. So this way, I in Asia work on this my morning. When I'm done, I send it to my colleagues in Europe. They take over, keep working on this. When they're done, they send it to people in Americas. Those keep working. Then the Asian team member wakes up in the morning and there is more work. So this way, sort of the work cycle never stops. And so that may make it, more productive and more, And so the question here is, so is it really time zone differences that create a problem, or is that alignment or misalignment that is an issue? So we can look at that. In addition, we also collected data. So when you are biologically most active, when you're available for this particular project, and then we also asked one of the semesters when in your country it is expected that people are available for a project like this. Maybe in some countries after 4 p.m. I'm off for the day, and you cannot even bother me. And maybe in other cultures, anytime, like 1 a.m. if I need to be there, I'll be there. So again, we may even add that kind of cultural, traditional, normative aspect to it. So lots of math here. I know Justin already started working on this, and hopefully something good will come out of this project. Then team charter and leadership. So in some semesters we had team charters, and in some we didn't. And it was more or less random. So we would have it one semester, not have another one, then again try to have it, then not have it. So we have a good mix here. And so the big question is, when people, teams do have a meeting and do write some sort of a team contract and discuss who does what and how much time they expect to invest in it, and what happens if somebody is not performing, and all those other things related to kind of team structure and organization. So do teams that have that, do they perform better or worse than those that don't? And we can do this research both at the cohort level, look at the semesters when we had the team charter required and when we didn't, or take those semesters when we had the team charter and then try to evaluate the quality of the team charters. Again, in some way, maybe length, maybe actually read them and code them for quality, and then see again if teams that evidently spent more time on developing the team charter if they actually perform better or not. So, and I see again, probably Bill added here some links to useful things. So,
yeah, that's sort of based on the psychological contract.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we talked also here a little bit about leadership in this context, and the only thing we need to do in terms of the leadership, we want to also, so that there has been some work done in that area, so we might want to coordinate with those people or make sure that it's a separate enough study. But again, when we talk about leadership, we have some teams, so we're never required to elect leaders in teams. But then some teams would have a formal election and they would appoint a team coordinator or leader. Some teams wouldn't have a formal election, but they sort of all have a leader who just naturally emerges and everybody knows who the leader is. And then some teams deliberately have no leader or just never got to it. And we have that recorded. So in fact, in some semesters, we measure that every single week. And so one of the study questions here could be, do teams that have formal leadership, do they perform better than those that don't? And likewise, what predicts who gets to be a leader? So is it the oldest person, the most fluent in English from the top ranked university with the most work experience? So again, it seems like there are multiple studies going on here, but all of those potentially can lead to good publications. So.
Yeah, I've seen a study, a recent one, about better team charters enable teams to handle disruptive events leading to better performance.
I actually literally just finished yesterday a book called Business Partnerships, I believe, or something like that. We're about to launch a few new Xculture ventures, and so I'm trying to find someone who will lead them, but I wasn't sure how to structure it, so I thought I would read this book about all forms of partnerships. And so they talk about just about anything and everything that can go wrong in a partnership, you know, from somebody just stops working, divorce, death, new partners, sexual harassment, all kinds of things. And so they devote a huge portion of that book to partnership charters, how important it is, what should go into it. They have like a whole list of issues that need to be discussed. Maybe we can even use their template to assess the quality of the team charters here, you know, how many issues they kind of spot and discuss and, decide on. So again, it seems like it's a very promising line of research. And to my knowledge, team charters so far has not been claimed as a study. We do have some work on leadership going on. But yes, if anyone's interested, it's basically available. And then measuring cultural values. So with Anna, we talked about, so we've used about a dozen different instruments for measuring cultural values, from Hofstede's to Matsniewski's to Dorfman and Howell. So all of them. And so for most of them, we have thousands of people who have taken those instrument surveys. And so one of the ideas was that maybe we should just literally just check if they are, equally good, or if some are better, at least in terms of internal reliabilities, factor structures, but maybe also look at predictive validity and things like that, convergent, divergent validity. So we have those data, and it would be nice to see if we can assess the relative quality of those instruments, and maybe in the end recommend one best or most suitable for like team level measurement, individual, national, and things like that. And finally, what Eric and Nicole, and we've been working on this for a while as a theme, but Eric wants to take a specific slice of it. So we have cultural intelligence in general, and you have here a lot of stuff going on proposed by Nicole, who is our host in in Denmark. But one of the aspects of the study that I personally like very much is just like we have rankings of nations in terms of cultural values offered by Hofstede or the Globe study, why not do the same rankings on cultural intelligence and maybe try to explain why we see them? So again, we have had tens of thousands of people who have taken the cultural intelligence test, and we can literally just calculate the total and see if maybe people in Northern Europe are more culturally intelligent than maybe people in the United States, or maybe the other way around, and then try to predict why. Is it something that, like globalization index of the nation? Is it maybe some sort of, percentage of immigrant employees? Is it something else? We know that people always make fun of Americans, that they don't know about the rest of the world. So this may be a way to test it. And if it confirms the stereotype, I suppose, fine. If it refutes this stereotype, I guess it's even more interesting. So we can look at those rankings. Can be done on total scores, can be done by separate dimension. So maybe Americans score high on, motivation, but low on knowledge about other countries or some other form. So it would be an interesting explorative study that will just give tables, a list of countries, which will have about 50 or 60 of them, and then average national score, at least in the student population. And so here is another aspect of the study. I'm honestly a little less familiar with it, so it must have been added by Nicole. But again, essentially cultural intelligence and performance in teams. So do culturally intelligent teams perform better, and social integration is sort of part of the model as a moderator or mediator here. So she even did some work, and analysis are mostly done, so maybe they'll try to use this marathon to finish it. And I think this is pretty much it. Yeah, so we talked about rankings. And oh, and somebody added conflicts. Again, it must have been me, I guess, since it says here. But yes, again, we measure conflicts every single week. We know how many conflicts team members had. And the big question could be, one, what leads to conflicts? But two, even more interesting, do conflicts hurt or aid team performance? We do differentiate between process conflict, interpersonal conflict, and task conflict. And so there is a lot of literature that suggests that maybe some types of conflict may actually be beneficial. So constructive task-related conflict may actually be good for good quality of performance. Interpersonal conflicts maybe not, but task-related conflicts might be actually constructive. And so we measure it not only as in terms of different types of conflicts, but it's every single week. And we can literally track progress over time if somebody knows how to do it right. So we can look at the consequences of conflict in teams, but also what leads to conflicts. And one interesting twist to this study, which can lead to a whole separate paper, could also be asymmetries in perceptions of conflict. Since every single person tells us how many conflicts they experienced every week, we can get an average for the whole team, but we can also see if, for example, if in some teams I say we had no problems, and John says that we had 25 conflicts last week. So if we have that discrepancy, so does it mean anything? Or why do some people see more conflicts than others? Again, is it cultural? Is it experience? Is it the very definition of conflict? Maybe for me, a conflict, that's when we go home with a black eye and, broken nose. Whereas for others, a conflict, I just say something slightly wrong and, oh, that's a big conflict and misunderstanding. So maybe there are even those kind of, perceptions in definitions, differences in definitions of conflict. So again, it seems to be like we can have several studies here, and each can be published as a separate paper, or maybe we can put them in some way in, and then finally, again, I'm not sure this one seems to be too difficult, but if anyone wants to take it on, every week we ask teams at which stage of team development they are in terms of forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning. And again, we have that data longitudinally for thousands of teams now. And we never knew what to do with them, but one of the obvious studies here could be what predicts how quickly the team reaches the performance stage. So is it, again, size of the team, level of experience, cultural intelligence, anything else that can explain which teams go quickly through this storming and forming and norming and get to performing and which ones don't. But it can be much more complicated as well. We can also look at whether or not being at the performing stage early helps with performance. We can look at those perceptions of asymmetries. Again, some people can tell us that we are performing and others say, no, we're still at storming. Likewise, some teams would reach performing, or at least they tell us so, but then a week later they revert back to storming, then again to performing. Again, if they have this kind of roller coaster, of team development, does it hurt the team performance, or is it creating constructive conflict and helps team performance? So all of those obviously potentially could be publishable studies. And again, we don't have to pursue all of them, but these are the things on the table. And so I guess now is a good time to see if any other ideas are on the table. And then once we have a full list, maybe we can then see if anyone's ready to commit, or they still believe, if they still need some time to think about it. So any new ideas?
I just would like to add something, because I'm working right now with a student of mine in global virtual teams. And so it's a large Canadian company that's having trouble dealing with their global virtual teams in Romania. And so what you're gonna do, you're gonna try to work out. And I was thinking if the cultural intelligence index or something, it could be, you could give us a clue about the way, to implement a solution or something like that. And I was thinking also in terms of if that kind of cultural intelligence profile if it can guide us in terms of innovative mindset or something like that, an innovative profile.
The profile is a very interesting aspect. We did just publish a paper, and I think we even have a couple of co-authors here, on general diversity in teams and how much it affects performance. And one of the measures there was cultural intelligence. And so we know if we wanted to correlate cultural intelligence either with personal performance, such as peer evaluations, or team performance, such as quality of the report, we know there is a positive correlation. In fact, unusually high positive correlation. So like it consistently predicts performance well. And even though we didn't have a dedicated paper for this topic, we sort of looked at that correlation at least in prior research. So this paper can either look at predictive power of cultural intelligence, but maybe have a bigger model, not only say there is a correlation, but maybe, you know, controlling for all kinds of things, maybe with some mediators, maybe with some moderators. So that would be definitely a very good paper. Or, as you said, profiles, not just a, you know, one point, one number.
No, a profile, a specific profile.
Yes, so maybe it should be a combination of different dimensions. So definitely a promising study. And let me just put that here so I can add it to our list. Yep, so we got that. Any other papers? I think, oh yes, Lily, you had another one?
Well, there are lots of ideas, really good ideas I'm interested to work on. And you know, I published mainly around cultural intelligence and how personality, international experience, and learning influence cultural intelligence. So I suppose I'm interested in any project heavily involved cultural intelligence. And then the idea about, you know, study conflict also fascinates me because I've been published on conflict management as well. In fact, previously I also have the idea to follow vast publication at JWB, where you tested cultural values and emotional intelligence. And
that was actually Mariana's idea. So Mariana was the leader on that study.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Now, my current idea is that I think, you know, personality definitely influences conflict management style. And bringing CQ into the equation, I think most likely it will moderate some of the important relationships between, for example, big 5 personality traits and conflict management style. And also, you know, following previous ideas, you know, personality might all national culture might influence, for example, the number of complaints in a team, and whether that's positive or negative.
Well, the beauty here is that we have measures of all of these constructs. We have cultural intelligence, we have big 5, we have conflicts, we even have emotional intelligence, or at least in some semesters, if you wanted to take a new look at, you know, at that aspect. So, and Mariana is an expert here, so she's done actually, you know, the one in Journal of World Business, but also I know she has a few other papers along those lines, so she would be very, very, you know, knowledgeable in that area if you wanted to kind of take a new look at that issue.
Okay, and of course, you know, we could link to team performance and, you know, other outcome variables in the project.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any other new ideas that we want to add to the mix before we start kind of deciding which ones we want to pursue this time and which ones put off for later? One more thing I wanted to say, I forgot to tell you. So we have 2 people on our team who are quantitative gurus, and if needed can help you. And so one of them is here, Justin. So historically he's been our kind of go-to guy when you need to conduct some sophisticated analysis. But also we have someone in Wisconsin, incidentally both of them were in Wisconsin at some time, Lonju Dom. So he's a professor international business there. He cannot attend this time again because he's now in the process of getting his green card. And so he's in this kind of limbo where he already applied for the green card but didn't get it yet. And so that makes travel for him very difficult because he technically is kind of undecided status at this time. And so he could not attend last year because he was in China renewing his visa. And this time he is not able to attend because he's waiting for his green card. But he will be available online. He's coming tomorrow, I believe. I mean, it's traveling today somewhere, but will be available starting tomorrow. And so Justin will be there right with us. Many people had brilliant ideas, but didn't know how to do the analysis. And historically, Justin would be involved in multiple papers and does all that analysis. But Lonju is same thing. So I've been working with him for many, many years. And so what's convenient with him is that you can dump all kinds of hypotheses onto him. And you just say, okay, Lonju, can you see if this affects this with moderating effect of this, and then maybe controlling for this. And he literally comes back in a few hours with, okay, here is what I found, here is what I recommend. And you say, oh, that's interesting. Can you also add this as a control and do it again? He does it again. So in many cases, the papers that we worked with him, he didn't even fully know the topic itself, but he was very, very good when it comes to data. And so very convenient for me, because this way I can focus on the theoretical aspect while he crunches the numbers. And so while he will not be with us in Denmark, he will be available online all this time. In fact, promise not to sleep during the kind of European daytime. So if any of you will need quantitative support, we will have a person who literally will be able to run those analyses quickly for you, and then meet on Skype every few hours as needed to provide the results. So again, if you need that kind of help, it will be available. Again, if you don't, no problem. We don't need to. But if you need, Lonju will be excellent. And obviously, as I said, Justin will be right there as well.
Sure, that'll be great.
Yeah. As I said, with Lonju and Justin, one aspect also of this collaboration is convenient. It's not even that you may not know how to do it yourself. Although again, like these two, they're way, way, way more advanced, for example, than me, and I even used to teach statistics. But also, this division of labor allows to move much quicker. So if somebody is fully focused on the data and somebody else is going through the literature and trying, I think that makes it a little bit, for a better process. So I highly recommend them as co-authors and quantitative sort of gurus if you need that sort of help.
Quick question, may I ask?
Yes.
Recently, I've seen calls for these not sufficient, necessary but not sufficient analysis. And at a conference earlier last month, I think it was, I saw a couple of papers that included that kind of analysis. I am not sure that that is necessarily one route I want to go, but it seems to be there seems to be an R based routine that, as you know, R is open software. That could be, again, I'm not positive that that's a route we want to go, or I personally want to go, but I just saw it a couple of times recently, and as you know, sometimes statistical novelties, methods novelties kind of attract attention of editors and reviewers and so on. So are either Justin or this colleague from Wisconsin familiar with necessary?
Lonju and Justin, both of them use R, including R, but also SPSS and Stata and stuff like that. But one thing that I like about them is that I tell, like, for example, Lonju, can you look at the correlation between this and that? And he comes back with those like 3D, like plain graphs and all that stuff. I'm like, whoa, okay, okay, that's good. And then he says, okay, if we add here like mediated, moderated, mediation, something, then it will be. So they're very knowledgeable in this area. When it comes to methodology, one aspect, I'm not sure if now is the best time to discuss it, but we are going through some process with Justin here. So we have a paper on the effects of acquaintanceship. And so we ran into some, kind of barriers there. So we're not sure how to proceed. And so had some questions about also some simple methodology. So we had essentially 4 experimental conditions, and we want to see if they lead to different performance, but we were not sure if we want to code those experimental conditions as dummy variables or do it as an ANOVA, because we want to add some mediation, explain how the process works. And I thought, the answer will be yes. You just do like dummy variables, or maybe just run some other form of simple analysis. And so I sent out an email to the Research Methods Division, Academy of Management. And so I got responses from, the usual suspects, like John Antonakis and, those other people that always respond. Man, so they sent us so much stuff. I'm like, whoa, and don't forget about this test, and don't forget that you have this, and this is non-parametric. Like, whoa, I mean, I just hope I will not get them as reviewers, because, they will definitely not be happy with a simple, regression or HLM or SEM. they point out, oh, don't forget that this variable has this, peculiar property, and because of that, this wouldn't work, and you have to adjust for this and for that and for this. I'm like, like literally you get overwhelmed. And so one issue I always struggle with when that happens is, should I offer them, like if this happens in the paper, should you invite one of them as a co-author and ask them to do the analysis and, get it like really, really advanced? Or should you just ignore it? Or should you learn it? Or should you, I'm hoping that Justin understands everything they said, because I honestly didn't understand like 90% of the things that they recommended. But yeah. But I think there is no shame in inviting help. Like if, let's say, there are 3 co-authors and, there is a way to do it way better, but it would require you to take a whole additional course in that method. I suppose there is absolutely no problem with maybe inviting one of those gurus to join and do the analysis in exchange for co-authorships. It's better to have a better paper with 4 people than, a weaker paper with 3, for example. Again, if you're lucky to have some people on the team who can do a good job and maybe, perfect job, great. But if not, I suppose, no problem with trying to expand the team. So
instead of expanding out, can we spend the little time we have left, 15 minutes or 20 minutes or so, and sort of begin to form groups?
Yes, let's move on to that, right. So we have the list of papers. I'm not sure anyone is ready to commit to any studies. What's the best process for that? Should we just say, okay, I want to work on this, or is there a better process? We have a bunch of management scholars here, so what's the, go ahead.
Maybe I'll start, because I pushed us to this part. I feel that I've committed to both Mariana and Voss to a certain extent with the peak performance. I'm not opposed to helping anyone, but as Voss maybe insinuated, rightly so, that I've become the bottleneck in a couple different projects. Some I pushing back, and others are in the backlog. So I would like to help, but please understand that I can only be in one spot at one time, right? So don't always depend on me, though I would always try and assist. But probably my primary focus will be on the performance.
Peak performance. And so we have 3 people there, Mariana, you, and I. So are we open to taking more people, or we are fine for now? Seems like we got it under control, but I don't know. Anyone is terribly interested in that particular study, or?
I'm not against having 1 or 2 more, but it depends where people sort of sort out. Like, I'm not going to reject anyone. That I don't think that's appropriate either.
Yeah. Well, and with all other studies, same thing. So some studies may be completely open yet, and nobody took control of them, like the one, for example, on conflicts or any. We listed a few. So with studies like that, I suppose at this stage, anyone who's interested probably would be feasible to invite them. If a study is already more developed, I guess the next question would be, what can a new person bring to the project? And if somebody comes and says, I can help with this and this and that, wonderful. If not, maybe lead author will be more comfortable moving with a smaller team. I suppose all of those are acceptable options. But so we have Mariana, Justin, and I'm kind of trailing with that project as well. Mariana, are you interested in doing anything else, or just this one? Same thing with Justin.
Not muted anymore. Like Justin said, I think the timing project is my main priority, because I think we should get going with that. But I'm of course interested in the conflict thing. So if somebody's working on conflict, I don't mind joining. But I would say, as Justin, I have my priority on this one project, and if I can contribute to something else, that's great. But maybe not with the full energy.
Okay. So I got you then for conflict. Anyone else is ready to?
I'm interested in the team charter project and related team leader ones.
Charles, yeah. Yep, got that. And by the way, again, like let's say, for example, Mariana and Justin main interest is, let's say, peak performance, but Mariana is also interested in conflict. Again, one thing we can do is literally hire Lonju and ask him to do some initial tests there. And if it looks like there is something interesting there, maybe we can then either do 2 studies, or start one, but then add the other one later on, but have some discussions at the hackathon. Maybe not with the goal of finishing the paper, but at least having something, going from there. So that is also a viable option, way forward. I suppose the classic model would be 1 paper fully done by the end of the hackathon, or at least as much done as possible. but a hybrid model would be perfectly fine as well. 2 papers, but kind of semi-finished by the end of the project. I suppose that's fine too. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, regarding the conflict idea, I had sent you an email, Vas, after the previous hackathon that would be one of the ideas I would like to join.
So Anam, yeah, I put you also for conflict, and then again we can refine the lists. Bill, you were, or David, you were saying something, sir.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in the conflict concept. There's a number of streams for that I think that would be interesting. So I'm also interested in if it moving on the measuring cultural values. That sounds like a little longer term, more extensive project to me, but I'm certainly interested in joining up with others on that. And then the last one you presented, Vaz, the developing or team development trajectories, sounds really promising to me.
Yeah, one thing that I'm worried about that one, it may require some, like very, very substantial amount of, data processing. And I wonder if it will be possible to get it done in a short period of time, because just, we definitely can look at it and start working on these.
I understand, but that's something that, even if it's not done at the hackathon, I'd be interested in joining up with people on that. And then, the peak performance alignment, it sounds like you've got that kind of covered. I'd be interested in joining up if I can add anything, but it certainly would be up to the current set authors whether they see if I could add anything there that's of any value. Yeah.
One thing also very important, that since during this week in Denmark, we will be, like, every few hours we will all get together and everybody will be presenting what they've done, getting feedback, criticism, suggestions. So in a sense, everybody will be involved in every project, at least as far as, paying attention to the developments and providing input and suggestions. And so what can happen, and usually happens, is that naturally some people develop even greater interest, naturally start making some suggestions that are valuable. And so as a result, let's say David, for example, starts, mainly focused on, let's say, I don't know, the conflict paper, for example. But then over time, you may either drift towards another project and they say, David, the ideas you're proposing are really good. Why don't you join us? Or, at least, you're working on the one paper still as the main paper, but sort of join as the last author on a different project because you have some interesting ideas, suggestions. So as I said, in a sense, we will have more time to determine who makes a contribution to which project. Likewise, maybe somebody will join, a particular project, but over time will understand that it seems like let's say I'm interested in the peak performance, but I realize that I'm not making much contribution here. So maybe I'll even drop out from that. So it seems like I haven't done much, so maybe that's a problem. And so I guess we can still keep this authorship assignment somewhat fluid and see how things develop and, who's making contributions and where. So.
Okay.
Anyone else is ready to commit or express interest in studies? Lily is raising her hand, I see, I don't know, and then Miguel maybe.
Well, as I say, I'm interested those projects, for example, 7, 8, and 9. So I don't know how the time will plan out, but basically it's CQ, national ranking, social integration and performance, and conflict. I guess so.
Yeah, Nicole is not here, so it would be nice to see, because apparently she says status data analysis mostly done. We're in the process of fine tuning. And so I'm not sure how much is left to be done there, but I suppose we can also ask, I'll send an email, so it may be a little too late to join that one. By the way, with some of these projects, again, we should be, and maybe that's a reason maybe even to drop them all together, or at least, some of these projects have been around for a little longer than just, this event, and have sort of a little history there. Like, for example, the next one, the 8 cultural intelligence comparison rankings. So Eric, I, Ilan, Michelle, and Christopher and Nicole. So we've had a list and a stream of papers that we've been working on, all on cultural intelligence, some published, some still in development, some under review, some R&Rs. And so it kind of creates this difficult kind of authorship dynamics, because we have some people who have been contributing to the stream, and sort of expect to continue working on this, but not attending the hackathon. So it may not be a very clean separation as to, you know, who works on the paper and who doesn't, especially when kind of new co-authors want to join. And so with those papers, it may even be safer just to keep them all the way out, so that the people who were involved in this stream before will not say, oh, how come you proceeded without me, or something like that. Again, each one would need to be, you know, decided individually, but I'm just thinking that some of these papers, you know, it just may create too complex a dynamics among the co-authors. So therefore, it's, you know, maybe something to keep in mind. Yeah. But let me just Lily. So she expressed interest. Let me just CQ, and what's the 10? I'm just trying to.
7, 8, 9.
7, 8, 9. Okay, yeah, got it. Yep. Who's next? I'm sorry.
Vaz, I've not been to a hackathon before. I was wondering if you could give a brief overview of what the work being done will comprise.
So the way it worked in the past, and again, it can be different this time, but on the first day in the evening, we met together and basically had this same meeting that we have now. We had a little bit less preparation in advance, so for many people, they didn't even, you know, hear any of this before, but we started talking about, you know, the ideas, who does what, and sort of, you know, selecting the most promising ones. Last time it was a smaller group, so it was easier to select fewer papers. But I think in the end, we ended up with like 3 or 4 that were most promising. And then some of us were involved in only one of those projects, and some were working on multiple projects. Like Justin was apparently involved in pretty much all of them as data analyst. And I'm not sure, again, if that was a good idea or a bad idea, but he was working on several at the same time. And some people were focused on papers. And then again, one of the mistakes not a mistake, but one of the things that caused a delay was that we started preparing the data essentially on the spot. And again, it's not a problem. I'll have my IT guy available as well. And so we will be able to generate any data set as we go within like an hour or 2 hours. But ideally, we want to have some of those data prepared even before you come to the event, so that you can start analyzing the data right away, or maybe even on your way to the event. And then it was very simple. So we just, you know, have a quick introduction in the morning. You know, everybody tells what they're going to work on, get some feedback and suggestions from the team. You know, like, you might want to use this method, or did you consider this specific, you know, aspect of the study, or maybe take a look at this paper because it seems like it's relevant to your study. We go and we work essentially till noon. Everybody works individually or in their teams. Then either right before lunch, or I think it could have been after lunch, depending on the day, we get together and report what we've done. And so I said, okay, I started analyzing the data. It seems like there is some correlation. It seems like we are onto something. We need to do a little bit more work. This is, you know, some of the challenges we encountered. And everybody sort of, again, gives some feedback and suggestions. And say, okay, if you have that problem with the data, maybe try this correction. If you have a problem with the model, you're not sure about the literature, oh, I just recalled another paper that may be useful here. So everybody sort of helps that presenter, you know, with the issues, maybe criticism and stuff like that. And so it would take maybe another hour or so, you know, like a few minutes for each project. Then we again separate into individual or small groups and keep working on this. And then again, before dinner, get together again, do presentations, updates, criticism, feedback, and then completely exhausted, go and have some lunch. And Justin organized, like one evening it was on a ship on Mississippi River. So it was a nice kind of evening. Then another date was like in an old like train depot or something. So with like steaks that were like literally this big. So we had also some social element to the program where people had a chance to get to know each other closer. And then there were some people who still had energy and after dinner would still keep working on the paper, and others were so exhausted they just went to sleep, and then basically the next morning we repeated. And so after day 2, we already had some results. Some people were working on the data, others were trying to write something and find literature. So this way it was possible to complete a lot. So we didn't quite have the full papers by the end, but we had enough to know, okay, definitely promising, this is what needs to be done next. We had someone like Wendy, it seems to me she was even doing analysis on the bus back to Minnesota, like she never stopped. So others, as I said, were not as, you know, stamina, couldn't work for like 14 hours a day just doing analysis. But that was basically the process. So
I'd like to add one thing, and that is, I don't know, a polite warning, I guess. What I found was it was great working with everyone. We worked very hard. I think we accomplished a lot. but probably 1 week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks in some cases. Then the momentum ended and all the projects sort of drifted when people went back to their regular routine. So I would suggest that we all try and keep up the momentum and keep it going and bring it into our weekly or daily routine so it doesn't fade away.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the best way to keep that, momentum going is to have an aim to submit the paper to the Academy of International Business in November. So that gives you a kind of nice self-imposed deadline. And so if you keep that in mind, it's November. And if you miss that one, then I think Academy of Management is in January. And so again, if you keep that goal in mind, I think that will allow us to finish it. But Justin is right. Once you come home, you have another conference. You have, you need a few days to relax. But then semester starts, and it may slow down the momentum. Okay, so we have a few people. I'm not sure who else is left here. So Nuria, Miguel, Anna, Bob, Ernesto, Eric, you guys ready to commit to projects?
Well, if I may, so in addition to the conflict one, I also told Ernesto that I would like to join the national rankings idea. And I also...
National rankings on which one? National ranking CQ or national ranking?
Well, basically, Vas, I was thinking about national ranking and performance. So
yes. It's not.
But yes, I like that Anna is interested because actually I didn't receive any other feedback. I think that one is an area that deserves to be explored because.
Yes. I remember, and we should have said more. Yeah, Ernesto had this idea that we can do national rankings on performance, but just about anything else, like language proficiency.
You can call it cultural background, nationality, language, or whatever. But I think we should actually put some lights there. Mm-hmm. And again, I do not see an immediate opportunity from an academic point of view. As a publishing. It looks like more a research report about what is going on, but I think we have to explore that area because I suspect that something interesting might come up, like it was for ranking, for example, a performance.
I think it would be publishable even as a series of research reports, like short paper. We had a data set. We wanted to see which country scores the highest on, for example, working language.
Yes, let me give you an example. I was looking back to the Webometrics for other reason. So the first 20, 30 universities are American. So actually most of the highest ranked universities are American. But what if the performance of the US student is not that great? So I suspect that might well be, for example, in respect to some North European students like the German or Scandinavian. We already know that regarding language, for example, people from Scandinavia and Germany are considered more proficient than the Americans or the British. This is something amazing. What about performance? And I think it would be very interesting also to try, because performance is something hard data in a way. Much more than motivation and self-esteem. So it is something that we should consider with care. And nationality, language is also sort of very objective data. And so we should actually spend some long term and maybe cross them with some data that are external to the database. Yeah. Like, for example, GDP, per capita GDP, or for example, spending in education. And something surprising might come out. I am certain that this is a fertile area.
No,
I would be interested in joining in on that too, Vas.
Yeah.
So as long as we have a database with some of those variables, I would be happy to work on it.
Yeah, and for this one, literally can be either a series of papers or one gigantic study, but we talked about, as you said, performance, peer evaluations, friendliness, language proficiency, technical skills. And so we have like literally probably 2-3 dozen of those sort of performance indicators. And even if it's just simply a list of countries and the rank, I suppose that already gives you something. If you try to explain
Yes.
it with like GDP, globalization index, I don't know, size of the country, who knows, a number of official languages. So all of those potentially would be interesting, mediators or explanations here. So yeah. Okay, got it. So, and I put Bob on that one. So.
I also told Stefan the complaining idea, but I don't know whether 3. Am I being too ambitious? But I think you said that maybe we could work on. It would be reasonable to or feasible to work on 3 different ideas.
Yeah, with this one, it seems
the number of people and the number of simultaneous ideas.
Yeah, one thing, again, we have at least 10 papers on the table here. And as I said, for the hackathon, we probably want to have ideally about 4, maybe 5. And so one way to go about these multiple interests is just select one for the hackathon and then put others sort of on the shelf.
In the waiting list, in the pipeline.
Yeah, so what I mean is still work on all of them, just during this week, only on one of them, but then continue working with those people on other projects after the after the hackathon. So this way, like, I definitely have interest in multiple studies, and so, but I know that I will not be able to work on multiple during those 4 days or 5 days that we will have. So therefore, it may be a good idea just to select 3, 4, 5 total, where everybody works on one, and that's the only one that we focus on during this, short period, while we have plans, to continue working on the other ones together as well, later on. So, anything else? Anyone, did we miss? So, seems like everybody, Miguel, I think, didn't express any.
Well, everything sounds so exciting. I mean, honestly, I feel like a kid in a candy shop. I mean, I really don't know what to say. I mean, everybody here, some of you we have not met for years. Others are new colleagues. So I really feel like I can't recall the dilemma or the paradox of too many choices. I mean, I really don't know what to say or where to choose. I mean, this is so fascinating. I'm just so looking forward to it, and I don't know what to.
One way to do it could be, again, so we have these papers. I can prepare the data, literally, in the next day or 2. We have enough people here with quantitative analysis skills, and if needed, we have even external support. And maybe we can even go with, try and see which ones it gives, like very simple tests, like correlations, mean differences, something like that, just to see which ones seem to yield the best data. Like, for example, the paper on citizenship, we spent so much time on it from the last hackathon, and it seems like it's not quite, we're not quite getting the results we expected. And so we even were thinking about maybe dropping it all together. And so it seems to me like a quick initial, probe essentially can identify the studies where you see like simple test correlations, maybe simple regression. You see right away you're getting the results you need. Maybe we want to focus on, whereas maybe another one, let's say we hypothesize that, I don't know, cultural intelligence affects something. And we try and, it doesn't seem like it has a 0 correlation. Maybe a more sophisticated test will give you something, but at least it doesn't look like it will be an easy ride. So maybe that's the one to be put on hold for now, and then, that's another option. Likewise, again, tell me, again, I cannot pretend that I know better what the process should be, but again, maybe we shouldn't decide right away who's working on what, or at least some people don't have to decide. And then, start working all together and then hope that within a day or so, people will crystallize their interests. It will be more clear, where people are making most contributions, and maybe decide at that time. So I suppose that's a viable option as well. So
right, like having a couple or 3 preferred studies to begin with at this point, and then make choices.
Yeah, talk to this team, to that team, see if you're making a contribution. Again, it's very important that we stay sort of ethical here. Let's approach one team and I say, well, guys, maybe I can help you. I have this idea. And they say, oh, we had that idea like last year, so we are done with that. So in that case, I'm like, okay, I don't really see how else I can help them. Whereas if I come to another team and say, okay, guys, did you consider this? And they're like, oh, that's the solution. Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. Maybe in that case, okay, so, or vice versa, you approach a team and you see that they are struggling with something. and you say, you know what, actually, I think I can take it on. Like, you don't seem to, you have an interesting question, you have the data, but you don't really know how to wrap it in a theoretical framework. And I think I can help with that. So let me work on this. So I suppose that will be a good way too. So, I mean, after all of these are management scholars. So I guess if anyone needs to know or knows how to organize teams, I guess that would be us. So, maybe let's do the following then. So we have some initial indicators. Let's have a homework for the next, let's say 24 hours, maybe 48 hours to review one more time every study. Try to be as objective as possible, trying to think where you can make a contribution, you know, which one interests you most. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that, you know I can do it better than anyone else. It can also be, I know I can invest enough hours in it, and I know if I do, I'll do a good job. Maybe someone else could have done an even better one, but I know I can cover this. And then maybe, you know, either send to me or put it directly on this Google Docs file. And then hopefully that will give us a little bit more time to think, a little bit more time to evaluate each project. Maybe even, you know, add your roles as I'm extremely interested, I know I can make a contribution, or I would like to be sort of involved in some way, pay attention, let's see if I can make a contribution, and we'll decide if I'm going to be a co-author or not later. So, and this way, hopefully we'll, you know. But one thing that I want to do, or need to have, is that we need to have at least a few projects where we have a clear leader, and that leader can tell me, yes, I'm definitely going to be a leader, I'm not sure who else will be involved, but these are the data I need. And if you can send me those, you know, this weekend, I'll try to have the data ready by Monday. And maybe before we fly out, like Thursday or something like that, maybe even we can start looking at the data before then. So the more you tell me in advance, the more you will have before we even land, and that will save some time. Nuria, sorry, you were going to say something? Yes, go ahead. I think you're muted.
Yeah. While you were talking, I actually came up with an idea which we had applied similar thing in a workshop with Nicole, where we sat around a table, and then we had all the ideas written down on big charts, and everyone had a possibility to sit down together, and then while you're presenting each of the ideas, everyone could actually see and come up with new ideas and write down, and that way a lot of people actually found out their common interest, and it was much easier to team up. So that could also be a potential idea to team up. And also, I just wanted to say that I was interested in conflict and social integration, and I was also involved with Nicole in those projects. So that was all.
Yeah. And yeah, that's a good idea. We may even try that, you know, on the first day. Another thing to consider would be also, I would go at this time or choose studies that are very simple, you know, studies that can be done with, like, where you know exactly what analysis needs to be done and you know exactly what the outcome should look like. Whereas some other studies may be much more complicated, and it may take literally a few weeks just of thinking how to do it. Maybe those, again, I'm not saying that we should drop them, I'm just saying maybe put them off. Like, for example, I don't know, some of these studies where we talk about like leadership and some, I mean, it seems to me that some of them will be quite complicated, just, you know, trying to quantify it. Whereas others, like national rankings, it can be something as simple as, you know, here is a list of countries, here is the average rank or average score for each country on the dimension. So again, for the hackathon, it may be wiser to select the simpler ones, where we know exactly what needs to be done, where we see exactly how much time it will take, maybe even where no matter what the outcome is, it's still a publishable study. If we find the effect, great. If we don't find the effect, still great. So, or like if it's a ranking, we're not trying to prove anything. So whatever we get here, that's what we get. So if the United States turns out to be #1, great. If not, not a big deal. So, and I also see many of you put some comments here, your interest, so I'll check that as well if I didn't write it down. So I'll try to add the names as we've discussed so far. Feel free to add and move your names as needed. Be respectful of the lead authors and check if they, you know, need more people, although I encourage everyone to be open here, at least at this stage. And then once you get involved in the study, still sort of, you know, monitor your performance and contribution. If at some time you feel that you're not really making much progress with this particular study, you know, self-withdrew. And vice versa, you know, if you see that you're making a good contribution, obviously maybe we'll even change the leadership team. Like we had some papers where we changed the lead author several times. The one on webometrics ranking, So it seems like we had several lead authors now as we're going through different iterations of the study. Nothing wrong with that.
Thus, may I ask you something regarding the idea of nationality and performance? You usually every week during Xculture are doing some checks on average peer evaluation, average performance. I am pretty certain you have been doing something explorative in that area regarding nationality. Do you have already some ideas about what might come up on that side? I am certain that you already have, you know, much more than you are revealing to us.
You're putting me in this area where I have to be politically incorrect. So we always have the struggle. Some professors insist that I must kind of reveal the slackers each week. And others, you know, every time you remember some years ago, every week, not only would I provide the data, but I would also provide rankings of the professors, say separately, you know, thank you to professors this, and this, because their students are doing a better job. And then professors this, and this, and this, you know, you need to talk to your students because you're at the end of the list. And so I would always get like 5 emails, like Peter Mendelson would be always one of them who says, yes, finally, yes, we need to show those slackers that, you know. And then like 10 other people, oh, come on, that's not, you know, ethical to do those rankings. I mean, we shouldn't be above that. It's so American to rank people. And so, yes, I can tell you this, Ernesto, that countries definitely make an effect. And there are some countries that every time, you know, year in, year out, they're always at the bottom. And then there are some that are always on the top. So you'll definitely have big difference, you know, there. So
yes, and maybe we can try to make sense of it. Maybe it is something related to language, maybe it is per capita spending on education, maybe it's something else, I don't know.
One risk there will be the professor himself. So in many cases, we may have a whole country represented by the same professor year after year. And I'll tell you this anecdote if you give me just 1 second. So for many years now, when the project starts, as you know, you send me the data, the names of your students. You send an Excel file, a roster with the student names in them. And we ask you to send those names in a specific format, in an Excel file with the names in the format where it's first name and then last name, not last name, comma, first, with proper capitalization so that we, you know, if the name is like Tim van der Meike, I don't have to think if that one there, if that's going to be, you know, capitalized or not. And then many professors do a good job and they send us the data exactly the way we want it. But then some professors don't do it well, and they would send that list of the student names like in the body of the email, or all names are in capital letters, or, you know, last name, comma, first name. And so that creates not only a lot of work for us, but also sends a powerful signal that the professor is not, you know, diligent enough or responsible enough and doesn't understand that, you know, it's important to, you know, it's just hard for us to manage it otherwise.
I have a question. Can I ask a question about that? I just thought of this idea, and I doubt it's for this hackathon, but it's something that may be easy to look at. Have you ever looked at the question of team and individual performance as it relates to supervision? Like you could almost relate it to supervisory performance
exactly.
as it relates to the percentage that a student is measured for their grade in the class, and then the variable team performance or individual performance.
Yes. And so even before we get into the percentage of the grade assigned to the project in the course, as I said, professor's performance is a huge predictor. So Simone has been counting those errors in the rosters. We call them strikes, and usually if there are more than 2 of them, let's say, you know, it's sent in a Word file, the names are not in the proper format, and some of the emails are not working. It's a guarantee that half of the class will literally be kicked out from the teams. Then you also look at, for example, whether or not the professor submitted the report evaluations, you know, at the end of the semester. Again, most professors do it well, some professors do it well but late, and some never submit the evaluations of the reports.
But has anyone written a paper on that?
Well, I haven't done any papers, but I have the data. And as I said, you know, if you look at who did the evaluations, again, professors who didn't submit the evaluations, their class will be much worse on all performance. And so on the one hand, it's a wonderful study that we can do. And essentially, we can be trying to find the best team composition model, the best cultural intelligence profile, whatever it is. But in the end, if you have a professor who is not taking care of the class, who is not informing them, all of that, it doesn't matter, you know. But also when it comes to rankings, one of the challenges maybe that while we have about 50 countries or 60 countries over the years, about 40 in a given semester, let's say you have country of, I don't know, like one, Ukraine, for example. And let's say from Ukraine, you have this professor who is not very diligent. And so while they have a lot of students, but it's the same professor every semester. And so the class may literally suck, may not do well, but it may not be because they're Ukrainians, but because the professor is not responsible. And vice versa, you may have a country, in fact, a good example would be Saudi Arabia. We have this professor, I never met her. The name is Jean, like, it's a Chinese name. And I never met her. She never sent me a single email, because we have some professors who send me like 10 emails every day. It takes so much time to deal with them. This one, I never met her. I don't even know for sure if it's a man or a woman, but her class is always on the top, like always on the top. And so again, she's one of a few from Saudi Arabia. And so that may create an impression that Saudi Arabia is, you know, like superstar, but it may be because that professor, she just gets the job done. So here it may be a little bit tricky because we may have to adjust for the professor's performance, or maybe drop the countries where it's only one professor. So, but otherwise, I think it would be a wonderful study. And yes, David, if you want to do a separate study on the effects of the supervision on performance, we have enough performance indicators for the professors.
I'd like to look at that, maybe on the side, though.
So if we have a significant number of professors in some countries, you know, for example, if it is coming up that Denmark is performing very well, or for example, Germany, and those universities are not where they are supposed to be in the ranking, that might be something interesting. Or we might, for example, see that it is GDP per capita that is explaining a lot. That might well be, because usually in education, the GDP of student is explaining a lot.
Yeah,
and so
on education,
if you are from Luxembourg, maybe you are not in a very high-ranked university, but you are very rich, and that is helping your education somehow. Yeah. So, yes.
Yeah, spending on education per student, you can look at those data as well. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Also, private versus public university, we have those data. Again, maybe size of the university. Yeah. Okay, so then just so we don't take any more time, the homework for the next 48 hours, try to think about what studies you want to be involved in. I suppose it's fine at this stage to sign up for multiple studies. We can then, as I said, self-select in the coming days. And then, especially importantly, decide which study you want to be the lead on, kind of take responsibility. And if you're one of those leaders, send me the request for the data so I know what data we need to prepare. I think for most of these studies, I have a pretty clear idea already, and I can probably prepare the data even without, you know, specific instructions. But it always is better when we have a person who has a very clear, takes a lead. And so ideally we want to have, as I said, probably 5 papers or so in the end. So although we can start with more, and then maybe based on the initial tests, then see which ones are the most promising. So that's fine.
I have one other thing to say. As you're going through the projects, might I suggest you also think about your, I don't know how to say this, so I'll just say it the best way I can. I apologize. But the prestige or the quality or the outlet that you're thinking about, because from the last hackathon, some groups were formed and different people had different expectations of not only the effort to put in, but also the outcome. And so that caused a lot of tension throughout the process. So please be honest with yourself as you talk with your colleagues where you want to go with your work. And if there's differences, maybe you have to choose the quality of outlet or the expectation of effort instead of the domain of expertise or your interest, right? So you might have to balance it.
Yeah, that's a good point too. That's a good point. In the past, we've been fine as far as, ethics goes. I don't think we've had any conflicts per se. So as I said, sometimes some people, like the study on acquaintanceship that we mentioned, I think originally it was my idea. I started collecting the data. I was the lead author. Now I'm probably the last one or one of the last ones. And it's perfectly fine. I just saw that at some time Justin was doing more work and then other people were doing more work. Sorry, not the acquaintanceship, that one too, but the one on the rankings of the universities. Again, started off with me being first. Now we changed the lead author several times as we had some rejections and submitted it somewhere else. So it's important that when you recognize that somebody else is doing more work, you just say, you know what, I think now you should lead the study. I'll be fine with being second, third, or last co-author. So yeah, I guess we'll continue working. You know, as long as you act in good faith, I'm sure it will be perfectly fine. Okay, so then waiting for your self-nominations for the papers. Team leaders send me the request for the data, and then I guess we'll see each other in less than a week, right?
Hey, Vas, on that, the logistics of that, I know some people have had questions in the chat about, are we meeting in Copenhagen at a certain time and all going together? Has that been decided, or do you know anything about that at this point?
And the problem is that the two people who can answer that are not here, so Alex and Nicole. But yes, I imagine that most of us will be arriving throughout the day. Like my flight, I land at 7 a.m. And I believe we have to be on the site by 5 or 6, something like that. And my understanding is that the train ride is about an hour. And as I understand, the train goes every 30 minutes. And so it's probably best to decide on the meeting place, those who arrive early. And then at the very least, we meet right at the train station somewhere. And, you know, once there are enough people, we just take the next train. But it can also be maybe even before that. If anyone else arrives in the morning, I was planning to spend a little time just seeing, you know, the city. And so maybe we can even meet somewhere else earlier and then, you know, go to the train station together. But I'll outsource it to Nicole and Alex, ask them to give us directions. They will know better how to do it. And maybe even collect everybody's arrival data. So maybe if some people arrive at the same time, maybe we can even meet at the airport and then take, you know, public transport to the town together. So let's plan on coordinating that in the next few days with the goal of at the very least knowing who arrives when, and if it seems like we are arriving around the same time, so we can have some meeting point either for sightseeing in Copenhagen before we go to Oden, or at least, you know, for the trip to the city. In the past, again, the trip, so we would meet in Minneapolis and then go to Wisconsin. And so that road trip to Wisconsin and then back to Minneapolis was actually one of the highlights of the whole event, because, you know, you're stuck in that minibus and, you know, you get to know the people. We started, you know, like jokes, and I think even some people were trying to sing songs. And going back especially, we occupied basically the whole minivan. So that was actually a fun part. So yeah, I would tell a joke and nobody gets it, and then Justin says, well, if nobody gets a joke and you have to explain it, it's a bad one. So by the time of that road trip, they at least knew that I'm a bad joke teller, so which is a useful piece of information. So, all right. So yes, let's try to coordinate the logistics. I'll send an email to Alex and Nicole and ask for some further directions in the next, hopefully, day or two.
We got one.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well,
Bye-bye.
I'll see you all in person then in a few days.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.